For a long time, the reddish cat named Ember was the only and most cherished creature in the home of Sarah and Daniel. She came into their lives when the couple had just moved into their first countryside house. That day, a downpour raged outside, and a small reddish kitten, soaked to the last strand of fur, was hiding under the porch. As soon as Sarah opened the door, Ember dashed inside without hesitation, as if she knew this was her place. From that very moment, she became a full-fledged member of the family. Her reddish coat glowed in the morning sunlight, and her emerald eyes brought to mind a warm July summer. Her owners adored her, calling her their little girl, their sunshine, their red princess. Ember was smart, graceful, and independent. She roamed the house like a queen, never rushing, never asking for anything unnecessary, yet always receiving the best. They didn't spoil her. They respected her. She decided who she'd sleep with, when she'd climb onto a lap, and who she'd allow to pet her. In the mornings, she'd come to the bed, stepping lightly over the blanket, sit beside Sarah, and purr softly until she woke up. For 3 years, Ember lived alone in the house, soaking up all the love and attention, but everything changed when they arrived in the family's life. 3 black dogs, an adult Doberman named Shadow, and 2 Labrador puppies, Poppy and Finn. At first, there was panic. Sarah worried. How would Ember accept the new kids? What if she felt unwanted? What if hostility broke out between them? To prepare, Daniel brought home blankets carrying the dog's scent so Ember could get used to it beforehand. Though she huffed and turned her head away, it seemed to them that deep down, she already understood something. When Shadow first crossed the threshold, Ember was sitting on the stairs. She didn't move, just watched intently as the strange, large, glossy animal walked by slowly. Shadow paused, looked at her, and averted his gaze. He understood who ruled the house. Things got trickier with the puppy's arrival. Poppy and Finn were rambunctious. They tried to lick Ember, play with her tail, and bounce around her. For the first few weeks, she lived upstairs, rarely coming down. Sometimes they'd hear her growl quietly if the puppies got too close. But there was no aggression or fear, just dignity and boundaries. Time passed. The puppies grew, but their fascination with Ember didn't fade. Shadow became their role model. He treated the cat with respect. Sometimes he'd lie nearby while she slept on the windowsill, guarding her peace. It seemed to impress the little ones too. Gradually, Poppy started approaching her slowly, lying down carefully beside her, and Finn learned to just sit and wait until Ember came to him on her own, and she began to come back. At first, only briefly. Ember would appear in the kitchen early in the morning, watching from her favorite spot on the windowsill as the puppies tussled over their bowls, staging little battles for a piece of chicken or the last sip of water. She didn't interfere, but she no longer fled. Sometimes, especially on lazy Sunday mornings, she'd lie next to Sarah on the couch and silently observe the trio romping around the room. It felt like she was judging their behavior, like a stern but fair teacher. And then something happened that the household would never forget. One night, as he passed the living room, Daniel froze in the doorway. On the couch, as usual, slept Ember, stretched out fully, paws tucked under her chin, tail twitching slightly in her sleep. And at her sides, quiet, serene, as if afraid to disturb her, slept her 3 companions. Shadow by her head, Finn at her feet, Poppy below on the rug. It wasn't just sleep. It was a moment of acceptance, silent, instinctual, as if no one had asked, "May I?" They just knew. She was one of them now. From then on, everything was different. Now, as Ember moved through the house, she no longer kept to herself. On the contrary, she often began patrolling the rooms, and the dogs took it as an invitation. Shadow followed a few steps behind, like a bodyguard. Poppy would bound ahead, flop onto the floor, and invite play. though she knew full well Ember wouldn't chase a ball. But the cat would approach, tap the toy with her paw, and that was enough for Poppy to wag her tail in delight. Most often, Ember chose Shadow. You could catch her sitting on his back while he lay on the rug. She felt safe there, like on a moving throne. Finn would tenderly lick her ears, and if she flicked her tail, he'd freeze, as if apologizing. None of them reacted to her feline whims. They accepted her rules. But the most astonishing thing wasn't even that. It was how the dogs themselves changed. They started seeing Ember not as a cat, not as a separate being. She became part of the pack, perhaps even its heart. When she entered a room, the dogs instinctively made space for her. When she slept, no one made a sound. When she gazed out the window, someone always sat beside her, as if guarding her even in a moment of daydreaming, each in their own way. On walks, they'd go ahead, eagerly sniffing every bush, but always glanced back. "Where's Ember?" And she trailed behind, dignified and unhurried, like a true lady. Sometimes she didn't join in the fun at all. She'd just sit on the porch and watch. And the dogs, as if sensing her gaze, would occasionally look her way, as if checking, "Is everything okay?" Sometimes she'd climb a tree, or the roof of the old shed. And if she got stuck, Finn would immediately start barking, running around, calling for help. He couldn't climb up to her, but he'd stay below until Daniel came with the ladder. There were especially tender moments too. For instance, when Ember fell ill. It was just a cold, sniffles, lethargy, no appetite, but it worried them. The dogs sensed the shift right away. She lay under a blanket on the armchair, barely moving. Then Shadow lay beside her and didn't leave until she opened her eyes. Poppy brought her favorite mouse, the mint-scented one with the tattered ribbon, and Finn lay at her feet, motionless for hours. Sometimes Sarah would walk into the room and see all three watching her, not playing, not barking, just watching, as if keeping guard. When Ember got better, she resumed her walks around the house. But now, the escort became an inseparable part of her route. Every morning, she'd head to the kitchen, and not alone. Beside her marched a whole entourage, Poppy in front, Finn behind, Shadow at her sides. Sometimes it looked funny, a little cat and three big black bodies walking like an honor guard, but no one in the house batted an eye anymore. Sarah would joke, "We can't even step onto the balcony now without Ember's permission." It was a jest, but there was more truth to it than one might think. The cat hadn't just become part of the family, she'd become its center. When guests came, Finn always stood between them and Ember. He didn't growl, didn't bite, he just stared, and that was enough. Poppy, hearing a loud noise, would flatten her ears and stand beside Ember, as if shielding her. Shadow always lay nearby when she slept. He knew his place was by her side, to protect, to simply be. The neighbors, of course, were stunned. "What, a cat bosses three dogs around?" A woman from the next property once marveled. "No," Daniel replied with a smile, "3 dogs love 1 cat." And Sarah added, "She taught them gentleness." Sometimes she'd go out to the porch alone. She'd sit on a cushion by the railing, close her eyes. The sun would light up her reddish fur, making it look like gold. A few minutes later, all 3 would join her. No one barked, no one jumped. They just lay beside her. It was their ritual, their quiet, warm bond. Sarah would watch them and feel that her home was filled not just with life, but with meaning. Because where else could you see a cat, once picked up in the rain, become the center of the universe for 3 dogs whose lives had begun with loneliness and fear? And in those moments, she understood, family isn't about shape, size, or biology. It's the choice to be there, the choice to love, even if you're a reddish cat and they're 3 black dogs.